So, thank you everyone for joining us this lovely sunny afternoon, and coming to learn a little bit about how we can help empower your first line workers with a digital identity. So there'll be myself, that's Amy Stokes-Waters. Then we've got Shelley Hill and James Marsden who will be speaking today. Me and Shelley are from Identity Experts. So for anyone that doesn't know who we are, we work with enterprise clients on their identity management and cybersecurity strategies. And when working with quite a few of the retail clients, we found that there was an issue around managing identities for frontline workers, first line workers, sorry, who are often seasonal, or they only work with an organisation for a short amount of time. So we found that there were some issues around how we manage the identity with those kind of workers. So that's why we've developed the solution we'll be presenting today. So I'm going to hand you over to James from Microsoft to talk a bit about the Microsoft vision for first line workers. James, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. So hi everybody. As Amy said there, we've worked together on kind of putting together this webinar today based on the kind of the backdrop of there's a whole conversation we could have about how we can really empower the first line workforce. And as you can see at the top there, core to this will be about through the application Microsoft Teams, and we'll briefly touch on some of the investments we're making there. But I think the backdrop to this is actually the provisioning of an identity to those first line workers actually sometimes is the blocker to get to that kind of those transformational scenarios. Just to kind of walk through the agenda then. So then after that kind of brief intro, I will hand back to the team who will demonstrate and kind of talk through some of the workflow behind that proposed solution. And then we'll finish off with this kind of a bit of a recap in terms of, well, how can we think about getting started with a pilot? And so both a pilot of this approach around identity and access management and equally of Teams. But really keen to make it sure it's interactive and we have discussions. So either, we can, if you've got questions during it, feel free to raise them, or equally we've got time at the end as well. We'd like to cover them off. So just to set the scene, and I will kind of whiz through this because I think most people probably are aware of this now. We at Microsoft, we're not just thinking about the enablement of information workers, people who work in the back office, everybody on this call, but really we want to start thinking about first line workers as well. And that's where we're making conscious efforts in applications such as Teams to really think about scenarios for those workers. So as we think about it in terms of who these people are, these people who are the first to engage your customers, represent your brand and see the products in action. So ultimately the opportunity to really engage those people and equally seek their feedback and digitize processes is huge. And we will be today talking we're thinking in a retail context for this session, but equally, I know the Identity Experts team are working across the other industries shown here. I know particularly around some of the work in around customer service and the scenarios within kind of manufacturing as well, where we'd see factory workers. So from a vision point of view, these 5 pillars are what we see as the actually driving and maximizing the impact of the workforce. So we could probably all start think of some of the enabling Office 365 technologies that could lend it their way to help foster culture and community, and providing a platform to help train and upskill employees, simplifying how they can access that content. But as an outcome from that, we then start to think, well, can we reduce the amount of paper and manual processes, which in turn would drive benefit to the business around cost savings and efficiency of time. And equally better customer experience as well in terms of delivering real-time expertise, so that we're not reliant on just a couple of SMEs within the team. Actually, the ability to crowdsource information on the shop floor is instant. And ultimately, this would lead to minimizing risk and cost. And that's the key point as well, as we'll come on to the next piece in terms of what is the status quo right now, and actually the risk and cost associated to that. So in terms of what the status quo is and what the challenges that the first line workers face today is that we're finding that they're often using outdated and obsolete tools. And everybody today in society, we've spoken about consumerization of IT for some time now. The technology on the right hand side there, WhatsApp, Messenger, Gmail, Outlook or Hotmail, these are tools that people use in their daily lives. And that's where, because of tools that maybe in the first line scenario aren't necessarily as modern, or equally investment's not been there, people are then turning to these shadow IT applications to almost to help do what we described before in terms of sharing information and accessing certain materials. But without that, and equally, think about some of the more broader comms that the business needs to share. We're finding actually it's this kind of scenarios around slow to receive information, or equally inaccurate information, or equally people just not being on top of the latest practice and procedures. And I suppose the other piece around churn as well is that the net effect from a employee satisfaction point of view is that people feel disconnected from the team, their direct team. So that could be a particular shop or store, or equally as part of the entire company. One of the solutions, so core to our Firstline solution is Microsoft Teams. So this session isn't about Teams. So unfortunately, we could spend, I'm sure, 45 minutes to an hour talking about Teams anyway. But these are some of the areas that we're making conscious investments to really tailor that experience for Firstline workers. And from the left-hand side there, around trying to reduce some of the noise, and so actually very concise number of modules. So it could be, as you can see, chat and calls could be the only things that that user sees. Just really to make it so we know Teams has got a huge amount of capability and potential that probably as information workers that we could really use, because we're always connected. Chat is really key to, as we think about Firstline workers. We've mentioned some of the kind of shadow IT services, WhatsApp and Messenger. So really we've built chat to be absolutely that kind of experience that users would kind of very easily get used to, and that's where reactions and emojis and stickers have to be part of that, to really help that form of communication. And then finally, shifts. That's one of our like a line of business service within Teams now that we've built into the platform. So again, thinking about digitizing processes, that people can now access their shifts away from the store, and equally get away from that absolute panic on the night before your shift, where maybe if your child is ill, or equally yourself, you're ill. How do you find someone to take your shift? And today we know that the reliance on shadow IT like WhatsApp or Messenger that could come into play, where people are going, can someone cover me please? We're actually using capability built into the platform. People could quite easily just request for cover, or equally the store manager could equally push out the availability of a shift at a push of a button. So these are some of the what we see as almost what could be enabled through Office 365. But in terms of getting there, though, we've kind of summarised 4 areas that we have to try and think about. And I've put the box around identity and access management because that's kind of the context for today's discussion. But equally, we'll be having conversations today around, well, actually, how do we then secure access across both managed devices within the store, or equally bring your own? And ultimately now, because we're thinking about a bigger population of people, that we need to make sure that the simplified IT management and administration is considered as well. We can equally add security onto that as well, actually having coherent control now across every user, so not just, again, the people in the back office. And the final one there around adoption and change management, the capabilities we're bringing to Office 365 and Teams, there needs to be consideration for how we can drive the kind of the messaging behind that, making sure people are aware of what's in it for me. And so adoption and change management is key to the success of any program. So digging deeper then into identity and access management, and as I said at the top there, it is the enabler, but also it can be the blocker. So I suppose for the information worker community, with enterprise customers with ranging from maybe 1,000 people in head office through to 10,000, or equally, we can look at global organizations where that, Microsoft is 100,000 information workers. But typically the number of information workers is far outweighed by the people who are what we would say is first line. But at least with the information workers, though, there's almost that legacy there of Active Directory, which, as we know, can easily be synced from on-prem to Azure Active Directory using Azure AD Connect. But what we found, though, is a number of customers today are at that stage where we've never provided an identity to our first-line workers. There's scenarios maybe where shared username and password. But if we're looking at apps like Teams, where it relies on an individual access, well, how do we fulfill that? I think the key point here is if we can get over this hump, though, actually, it's not just about Office 365, but other SaaS applications, and that could equally be other line of business processes where you want to drive accountability and auditability. But as the last 2 bullet points suggest here, it's about, well, how do we think about the decision for who's in charge of this. Does it need to be automated from a central HR repository, or actually would we be happy with delegating the permission to a management role in the store to do this? And in the same way, if we think about what happens today, where someone may join a new store to start their employment, and to join the community or the chat, they'll have to provide their phone number to be added into, like I said before, it could be WhatsApp, or equally into another service which is not managed by IT. So ultimately, this leads to this piece around what options are available for IT to simplify and to enable their first-line workforce. And that's where I'll be passing over to Shelley at Identity Experts to kind of talk through and I think really bring it to life from a demonstration about what could be possible. And we'll then talk about some of the architectural workflow behind that as well. So Shelley, I'll pass over to you if that's okay.
Hi, yeah, that's great. Thank you. I will just share my screen actually. Just one second. Okay, hopefully you'll be able to see that. Okay, so F1 licenses, provisioning F1 license holders provides your first-line workers collaboration tools, so you can keep control of your corporate data while enabling, as James was talking about, the ability to chat and have those the collaboration they need to interact with each other. So when you employ new staff, you can provide them with access to appropriate groups and information. When staff change locations in stores, you can move them between locations. And when they leave, you can remove their access so they no longer receive updates regarding the store codes or the shift information. So that just means that potentially sensitive information that's on a need-to-know basis is actually controlled. So I've got this little demonstration here, and I'm going to show you provisioning accounts for F1 licenses. We've set up this little dummy front end, and this front end is completely customizable. It's just our example that fulfills the need for this demonstration. The actual data source for your employees could be an existing database, it could be your HR system, or it could be your own front end. Okay, so let's say you have a store manager that needs a portal for inputting new first-line staff. So they've turned up on the first day, and we're going to put their details in. Should have thought about this earlier. Give me a name, Amy. Actually, Amy. Oh no, I think you might already be in there.
Margot.
Oh, okay, good. Yes. Okay.
My 1-year-old, she's got a job really early, kicking her out.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, Margot is going to be working in Leeds, and her department is in IT. Actually, she takes after her mummy. So we could, choose any store, but I know the Leeds store is up and running. So I've got a mobile number for Margot here. Just one second. I'll copy and paste it in. Here we go. It's Margot's number. And, Margot's only going to be working with it. Well, I only think she's going to be working with us for a couple of weeks. So I'm just going to put her. I think she said that she had to leave on the 5th, so I'll just submit that. Okay, so it says Margot Stokes Waters account has been created successfully. So just one second, I'm going to flick back here. I'm going to just share. I'm just turning my camera on, and hopefully, if you try and look at me, I've shared my camera. You can see my mobile phone. Can anyone see that? Yep. Okay, great. So in a minute. We should get a text message. So we'll just wait for that to come through. So while we wait for that, I'll just talk you through this setup here. In our example, we are using the employee's mobile number, but the mobile number isn't persistently stored. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It also doesn't even have to be a mobile number. It could be an email address. However you want to disseminate the password is customizable. We do have experience of employees being resistant to providing personal details. There's definitely a big brother is watching mentality. And I guess this is where, however you choose to disseminate the passwords, promoting the adoption of the technology is so important. So making it clear to the employees so they know that the password was deleted after registration. You could even say that on the screen there. It will only be used for registration purposes. As James mentioned, they do share their number for WhatsApp groups. So hopefully they will appreciate that this is perhaps less of an invasion. Now, often this is a very transient employee group. So I sent the end date because I know that Margot will be leaving in a few weeks. There you go. Text messages come through. What was I saying? Oh yeah. So the end date. We know that she's leaving in a few weeks, but you may have permanent staff or staff without end dates, and you just need the facility to either attest the validity of the active accounts, perhaps extend them or deactivate them. So I've got an edit user function here where I'll be able to. I mean, it's very, very basic for this demonstration, but and then we also have the facility to delete them from this as well. So however, whatever the data source is, just having that ability for the extension or deactivation of the accounts is obviously quite important. If you do use a front end like this, you may actually also want to use it as part of your onboarding process by feeding information back to HR to say the user has started, because I know non-starters is sometimes an issue in organizations where there perhaps is a more transient workforce. And this information that you send back to HR, it could trigger other workflows. Well, okay, so now I've got the text message, and I've given myself an extra couple of minutes just to make sure that everything's gone through. So now I'm going to try and sign into Teams. Actually, first I'll show you. Oh, I'm not sure. Hang on, just one sec. Can you see? I just can't see what I'm showing you. Make sure I'm in the right. Okay. Right. So I've logged on. I'm going to open the text message. Let's have a look. See what it says. Okay. If I go close, it says your login details. So I'm just going to pop that there. And logging onto Teams, it says to log on as Margot.
I suppose obviously for the demonstration, Shelley, obviously you're copying that in, but there obviously is a hyperlink as well that within that text message that you could if the user is a mobile user, which would associate in Firstline, they could click through. But I suppose just for the purpose of the demo, it's just probably a little bit easier to show on a desktop browser as well.
That's actually good. Thanks for pointing that out. Actually, yes, it's just purely for this reason, because obviously I suppose they'd want to download the app as opposed to using the web app that I'm going to be using right now.
Yeah.
So it's got my password. Right, so I'm signing that in, and it's going to ask me to change my password. Time. Okay, so just say next. Oh, that's unlucky. That didn't happen at practice.
The curse of the demo.
Ugh. Yeah. Oh no. Don't go through that loop. Oh yes, here we go. That's good. So after I change my password, it's asking me to enable MFA, so download the Microsoft Authenticator app. I'm going to skip that because I don't want to do that today. And there are other options that it will let you do as well if you don't want to use the Authenticator app. And let's just, I hope this opens. Here we go. Excellent. So I'm going to make my screen bigger. Oh, Teams. Let's go to Teams. Oh, do you know, I didn't pad for long enough. It needs another minute, I think. So that is...
Why don't you go through that architecture workflow, Shelley?
Yeah, so that's a good idea. Well, all right. Well, actually, we can see where it is. Yeah, I'm surprised. I thought that was long enough. Usually it takes about two. Oh, no, it's there. Yeah, because I was going to say usually it takes about it's usually about 2 minutes. So yeah, I was going to jump in and we could have seen where it was at in Azure. But anyway, great. So we can see. Oh, now it wants to tell me all about how to use it. So now that I'm in the IT team, well, Margot is in the IT team, and so Margot can find, see anything to do with IT. With a bit of chat going on there, and she's in the lead store. So looking at the lead store, we've got, James, you recently shared that there's a new code, and then Jamie's saying that the door isn't working. Has it changed again? So Margot has been dropped into this store, and it was, as simple as that, just letting the processes have the full 2 minutes in the background to run through. But yeah, so you can see that's pretty quick. You can, obviously, if I flick back here, however format it take, it's very easy to, edit the, edit or update the location, and it only takes a minute or so to flow through. What I'm going to quickly do is just show you what's going on behind this. So you saw how easy it was. I put the information in, got the text message, registered, and I'm in the right groups. I'm in the right teams for my role. Now I'm just going to flick over to Azure AD. Okay, so I'll just show you in the portal. So I'm in Active Directory, and if I go into users, and then I can just search for Margot. There we go. So we can see Margot is in our Azure AD tenant. There we go. We'll look at the groups that she's in. And there we can see that she's in the IT group, the leads group. She's been assigned the license, and she's actually also in the Lookout Viewer group. So obviously, Margot is not aware of these other groups that she's in, but she will know that she's in the IT and leads group because they're the teams that she can see. Now, as far as the actual architecture goes, I have got a high-level diagram here. Just let me share. Hang on, I'll turn that off. I'll share. I'll flick back to the PowerPoint. Just 1 second while this opens. Actually, Amy, it's not letting me. Amy, would you be able to, or James, would you be able to share the PowerPoint again?
Yeah, I can do that. That's no problem.
Oh, thank you. It's just the next slide. Oh, it was just. Oh wait, actually. Oh yeah, if you have that, that's great. It wasn't letting me, but.
There you go. Is this can you see that okay on the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I can see that now. Thank you. Yeah, it was the option was grayed out for some reason. Okay. This obviously it's a very high level diagram, but you can see that we've got Microsoft Identity Manager, or MIM as it's called. It's really the centerpiece doing the provisioning. So what MIM is doing is it's aggregating information from disparate sources, and then we use MIM to trigger the provisioning and deprovisioning of accounts and access. So once you've got this foundation in for your F1 license holders, you can connect to HR, you can connect to other line of business apps, either on-prem or in the cloud, and then you can start to automate the processes for your joiners, movers, and leavers. MIM provides incredible flexibility with what you can connect to. So it provides that link between managing users on-premise and in the cloud. So you can have that hybrid environment that is managed with a single identity for every user, so that you know who has access and what they have access to. As James said, that if you had multiple line of business SaaS apps, that's all able to be incorporated through your Azure AD tenant and managing that access for your users, so that when they do leave, you're able to deprovision their accounts and therefore cut off the access, and just maintain that the security of your corporate data. Is there anything you want me to say about this diagram here, or is it pretty self-explanatory?
I think the other piece as well was you showed the groups within Office in Azure AD, and obviously how that they're reflected into teams. I think the idea here is obviously in that initial the store manager portal, or retail portal as you describe it, those drop downs of selecting that is almost to reflect, as we said before, that kind of experience of where we see new starters joining, and then it's typically, if it's not a corporate tool that's provided, it's quite a manual effort on the manager to say, I'll add you in with your mobile number, and and then in terms of then how we can say if that individual leaves the store, so they leave their employment, how we then manage that, who's in control of that piece. But equally, if they move into another store or even their job changes, how do we then make sure that they get put into the right team to participate in chat and equally access to other resources that can sit behind Microsoft Teams? So I think that's the kind of the joining the dots there at the top in terms of what how Azure AD can play that role in kind of the automation. But as you said before, Shelley, MIM is the engine, and in this instance we've started with the portal, but equally we could also be having a separate discussion, and maybe it's a follow-up conversation about how actually we could just automate this from the start, and actually looking at as you describe it, there are other systems and databases.
And also, as opposed to just the first line workers, it's the information workers that you could start to manage as well. This sort of provides you a foundation, which is providing, it's providing a really useful tool, but then just being able to build on top of that. It's multi-layered in the value that it can have for the whole company.
Okay. Was there any questions from anyone on the call as well? I know that we've got time at the end, but is there any immediate questions around this diagram or what's been shown by Shelley?
Is it MIM specifically that's handling the automated workflow behind the scenes that's going on and doing all that stuff?
Yes. So it's MIM, the actual engine behind it, that's actually assigning people to the groups.
Okay. Does it have like a workflow? Does it have a UI workflow engine, or is this all done through PowerShell or something? I don't know if it's a UI workflow engine. MIM is a synchronization engine that it's state-based. The workflows are triggered by the change in state. So there aren't actual workflows in place. I don't know, would you call them workflows, James? It's more a logic base. With that, how you'd say it, James? I don't know how to describe it really. So I suppose you're not familiar with MIM specifically. No, so I haven't used MIM. It's more a case of, so if you've selected sort of leads or a store or something, an entity of some description, how it determines that there's a group that matches that. All of this, I'm assuming, is set up in the background prior in advance, that sort of thing.
So it's state based. So as soon as that store changes, the MIM says, well, okay, it recognizes the change and it forces the update.
Yeah, and I think as well, in terms of if for those who've not used MIM before, I suppose it's at the I suppose obviously we showed the Azure Active Directory portal there, but I suppose again as a follow-up, and maybe as what we'll talk about the next steps as well, it's almost how would you go about configuring MIM to do, like I say, to kind of to know which what options are available, to then obviously to trigger into what groups are available in Office in Azure Active Directory, which, as we said before, inform the team that those users drop into. So I think possibly a deeper dive into MIM, but actually that could form part as a follow-up anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. We could just demonstrate like the actual VM that we have MIM running on.
So the creation of this Azure user, I take it they don't need to be synced back to an on-prem Active Directory. They can literally just be left out in the cloud.
Well, they are synchronized with the on-prem AD.
Okay, so we would sync that back to our on-prem one here.
It would, yes, it does. Yes, it does. It has to remain in sync, so that because MIM is controlling it. MIM isn't sort of necessarily connecting directly to the cloud. It's doing it through Azure AD Connect. So what Azure AD Connect is doing is it's synchronizing AD and the cloud tenant. So it's synchronizing the two of them. So technically, it's not MIM. MIM is putting them into the appropriate folder in the appropriate groups in Active Directory, but it's actually Azure AD Connect that's doing the synchronization, and it keeps those two synced. There are rules that you can set up. Obviously you don't want all of your Active Directory synced to the cloud, so that's not going to happen. But obviously for your first line workers, they would be synchronized to the cloud.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I've just noticed the it syncs with the local AD and then goes out as opposed to out and then in. Okay, cool.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's okay. We'll just run through in terms of the getting started piece, and I think we still have time for questions at the end. In terms of just moving things on, so getting started with a pilot. I suppose, Amy, do you want to just take us through? I suppose I can make a start really in terms of the. I'll pass it over to yourself, Amy, if that's okay. I mean, like really, we want to make sure customers have a path to almost start to demonstrate this. And I think there's two angles again looking at this. One is that we want to have a conversation around enabling technologies such as Teams, but equally we need to make sure that I suppose people on this call, there's the comfort that actually we've got a way we can actually scale this across identities for across all stores or all regions, however you want to shape it. I suppose our recommendation is to start with the smallest logical grouping. So as you can see there, a store or a team. Sorry, Amy.
Yeah, I was going to say that's right. So what we normally do, we found we've had quite a few years' experience doing this now. We find that it's easier to start with a pilot or a proof of concept. Like James said, it's starting with the smallest logical group. So if it's one store or one team, that helps us to inform the strategy for the wider rollout. So we can understand, we understand that changes to user behavior don't necessarily happen overnight. And it's important that we can validate the user's readiness as well as the technical readiness as well. So we need to look at things like the internal processes and whether those need to change. And really get some feedback around user behavior. Around user adoption as well, so that we can inform the processes for the main project to make sure that any project that we do is a success, and that you get engagement from the wider business.
And I think as well, just to add to that, is because now, like I say, a lot of our focus on Firstline and the hub experience for that is being Teams. I've said Teams now a lot of times in this call, I think, but there's a number of ways you could start. And I think, for us, it's about having some focus scenarios. And I think the one which, probably has resonates across all of what we spoke about today is maybe like simplified communications, in-store communications. And then maybe just thinking about optional ones, either optional initially or equally optional down the line. So things such as shifts. So otherwise, we just want to make sure we don't try and boil the ocean from the start, really.
Yeah.
But in terms of like a logical order, though, really, in terms of how we think about, where to start, and I think, as you said before, it's kind of gathering the people who are involved in this, obviously project stakeholders, and ultimately then planning the logistics for the pilot. And I suppose where the work with identity experts would probably come in terms of is around the configuration aspects. That's more of the technology side of things. And so obviously identity would form a key part of that. And obviously then the subsequent aspects are actually about communicating the change and, measuring the feedback and ultimately having it.
We can support on that. Like you said, James, we do normally come in and do the technical side of things, but we're also happy to support around the user adoption piece as well. So we have got some tools in place that we're currently using around user adoption to improve adoption of Office 365 and EMS through user bases as well. So we're happy to support on the full cycle of a pilot.
So I suppose then, in terms of, like I say, from the configuration side of things, as just specifically, I suppose that's where probably next steps really. I suppose, Amy, if you want to take this, probably if I was telling your slides there, couldn't help myself.
No, that's fine, no problem. Yeah, so identity experts, as I explained a bit before, we work with enterprise clients. We're very flexible in how we work. So sometimes we work as part of a customer's project team. So you might have some internal resources that you want to take advantage of. We're happy to come and join your project team. Other customers want us to work totally separately and want us to just drop in, do some work, and then leave them alone again. We're more than happy doing either way. Whatever's best for our customers is how we'll work. We're efficient, so we run, like I said, proof of concept pilot programs. They let us validate processes. That lets you gain buy-in more quickly. It means that your project will probably be delivered a lot more quickly than if you try to just start the whole thing from day one. So we like to make sure that people have got buy-in, that they understand that processes that things are going to have to change a little bit, and that they've got an understanding of exactly what it is that we're implementing. And yeah, user-centric. So we use feedback from our end users to inform user adoption processes. Like I said, so that we make sure that your project's a success, because we're going to have full uptake of any solution that we put in, and we're not going to be sat in the same place 6 months down the line going, "Oh Jesus, why have we done this?" No one's using it. So yeah, that's our approach. So an outline plan, what we'd recommend for the next steps, if anyone's interested in having a chat with us about this, hopefully you are, is we can have a bit of a scoping discussion, so we can have a look at some initial requirements, quite high level, get an understanding of the minimum viable product that we'd need to do for an initial pilot project. Then we'd come in with one of our tech resources and do a bit of a workshop with you to get a deep dive into those requirements. We'd then produce a proof of concept, like we spoke about before, for a subset of users, so potentially one team or one store. And then we'd look at how we roll it out to the wider organisation. So that's what the next step should look like, hopefully, for everyone on this call. My contact details are in the corner, bottom right. If anyone's interested in having a chat about this, I'm free most of the week, actually. So if anyone wants to send me a message, I'm all yours.
Thanks, Amy. And just to finish off then, in terms of the content for today, it wouldn't be a Microsoft, joint webinar with identity experts, but we're talking about licensing. So I appreciate we want to make sure we understand how to enable this. Core to getting access to Microsoft Teams is Office 365 F1. I suppose that's the target licensing model we see for the first-line workers. Obviously, for information workers, there's other SKUs, the E1, E3, E5 of Office 365. But I suppose in terms of access to the Microsoft Identity Manager service that was described, that really there's kind of three options really. And I suppose the starting point would be a discussion about Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 1. Just for those who don't know, every Office 365 license comes with Azure Active Directory. So actually Azure Active Directory is the enabler. What we're thinking about here is this additional license then lights up. You can see the additional capabilities, but with that license type, it includes the client access license for Microsoft Identity Manager. So you'd still need to run this on a Windows server, which will be licensed separately, but you have the ability to run MIM on that server. I think key thing is for those who aren't as aware, AD Premium fits within the enterprise mobility and security suite of products. So and there's an E3 and E5 version of EMS, and then in terms of how we think about Office 365 EMS and Windows licensing coming together, we have a SKU called Microsoft 365 F1, which is again is designed for the first line workforce. But I suppose that license type there comes into play where we're talking about actually the devices those first line workers use being upgraded to Windows 10 or equally being provisioned. And the device we're speaking to a lot of customers about right now is Surface Go. So as a smaller version, a more mobile version of the Surface Pro device, and actually whether that's on a per user basis, which probably for maybe store managers or assistant managers or section leads, but actually in terms of, there's also use cases there around actually those devices being shared as well. So actually people can be productive and authenticate with Azure AD and obviously get access to Teams. It's worth pointing out as well that, in terms of AD Premium, that, once we've enabled, provision the user, as we said before, using MIM as that engine into AD, into Azure AD, and ultimately to an Office 365 group, we can also then layer in some of the additional Azure Active Directory capabilities as well, from MFA, SSO, and actually one which I'm seeing a lot of customers looking at right now is around requiring acceptance of terms of use. So actually, so that for the first time they authenticate, they'll get a prompt to say, are they happy, actually to make sure they're aware of this app is a corporate app, and actually to make sure they respect the policy as well. And obviously that can be absolutely customized to your requirements, but it's just another way of making sure that users are aware that this isn't the consumer app that they may have been used to using. Actually, this is a work app now as well. And then finally as well, some of those pieces around self-service password reset and I said before around security. Actually, now you've got a broader estate of people now who have got an identity, making sure that you've got access to reporting so that you can start to detect and respond to risk. So that's the licensing piece, and I think really just to kind of piece it together, the jigsaw of what was, as I said before, Microsoft 365 F1. So these are all the capabilities on a page. So today, we centered a lot about identity enabling teams, but also we know customers who've invested in the use of SharePoint, for intranet portals, and equally, we still know and rely on email within our in kind of the first line scenarios. So moving away from generic IDs to true shared accounts. And actually as well, Yammer, we don't probably talk as much as lead with Yammer, but a lot of customers right now are seeing a lot of still continued success on driving that social network beyond just the back office and actually the entire workforce. And in terms of enabling technologies, as we said, Azure Active Directory, once we've got those identities into Azure AD, obviously then it's layering some of the premium functionality. And as I said before, we could have a separate discussion about actually how could we think about options around device and application management using Intune. As I said before, that could be whether it's corporate devices or BYOD. And with Microsoft 365 F1 as well, this provides you the ability to then have every device in your business running Windows 10. So I think that's it in terms of any content today. I suppose I know we don't have a huge amount of time to run over, but we're happy to stay on. Is there any questions or any short observations?
The F1 license. So does the F1 license for everyone who's got an F1 license that grants them Windows 10 and Teams access?
Yes, it's Microsoft 365 F1. Yes, so it cover Windows 10 devices on a per user basis, but it moves away from it then having to count the number of endpoints in the business. It's you license the users instead, and this top row here is all the Office 365 F1 functionality. As a summary, it's obviously there's other services like Stream as well, and I'm trying to think now off the top of my head, but or OneDrive as well. But these we see as the core pillars of what's included.
The online versions of the web of Word and PowerPoint and stuff as well. So you can view documents.
Absolutely, yeah. Good point.
Okay. Does it cover an on-prem user cal for Active Directory? So at the moment we've got 500 E3 licenses for sort of head office and a few other sort of people. And if we wanted to put that out to stores, that would add another 2,500 F1 licenses. Yeah. Is part of the cost of that F1 license, does that include the cost of an Active Directory on-prem cal as well?
Yeah. So it's the EM. So basically, as the component of Microsoft 365 F1, the EMS component, Enterprise Ability and Security, includes the Windows Server cal. So that's as you said there. That would answer that question really in terms of being able to run Active Directory on-prem, but obviously and equally includes the cal for SCCM. So those Windows 10 devices we spoke about before, as you start to think about provisioning them, it may not be that you can adopt a modern desktop approach from the outset, just using purely Intune. So you may want to cover the so you mentioned 2,500 employees. They're running. Say if it's 1,000 devices in the retail estate. Well, all the devices will be covered for Windows, and equally whether you choose to use SCCM or Intune. But that would be through, I suppose, the combination comes together with Microsoft 365 F1. But I suppose if you are still running Windows 7 for the time being, or using Windows 10 Pro and not wanting to get access to Windows 10 Enterprise, it could be a combination of Office 365 F1 and EMS E3. With EMS E3, that's the license that brings the server CAL and the SCCM CAL as well. But it's yeah, I mean, these licenses are, they're all well documented and what's included online. I suppose the only thing I'd say is that when a customer is licensed with Office 365 F1 for their first-line workforce, or equally as you're scoping this out, speak to your Microsoft account team about the licensing costs for AD Premium Plan 1 and EMS E3, because there are concessions available which allow you access to the same service, but it takes into account this is for a first-line worker and not an information worker. So yeah, definitely a discussion to have with your Microsoft team.
Okay.
So I suppose, yeah, some of it is there's different options, but I think the key decision point is, your plans for Windows 10. And I suppose that's where, Windows 10 is on the agenda or is already being used in the estate and you want to get to Windows 10 Enterprise. That's we recommend the Microsoft 365 F1 license for that scenario.
Okay. Yeah, most of the, I think all the devices that we've got are largely fixed license. So they were sort of uplifted OEMs from, whenever they were bought, so they're not eligible for any kind of sort of improvement, if you like. But if they're covered under an F1 license, then yeah, we will probably need to replace the devices and or user accounts and things. Obviously, everything's moved from per device, which is what our existing estate is managed under, or our existing store estate rather is managed under, and moved to a per user because we've got so many sort of transient staff, Saturday workers, stuff like that, that they don't need to be identified uniquely or have not needed to be identified uniquely. It's all been based around a store. The store is the entity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I mean, that pretty much covers it for me, I think.
Any other questions, anyone? I mean, like we saw Amy's details before. I'm conscious my details weren't shared on this as well, but yeah, definitely look me up on LinkedIn if there's any questions as well you got from a more specific to Microsoft point of view, or for those who know me as well. I think some of my customers have joined the call as well today.
So are you going to share the slide deck and the recording with us?
Yes, we will send that through.
Thank you.
No problem.
Great stuff. Well, thanks Amy and Shelley. Then if you want to close out, Amy.
So thanks everyone. Lovely to have a chat with you all today. And yeah, if there's anything you guys want to have a chat about, my contact details there, so feel free to get in touch. And I will send through the slides and the recording to everyone that joined today.
All right, lovely stuff. Thanks for your time.
No problem. Thanks guys.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.